Around the year 1188, a churchman sat down to write a book explaining Ireland to the men who had just invaded it. His name was Gerald of Wales, and he was no friend of the Irish. His book, The Topography of Ireland, was written for the Norman conquerors, and much of it reads exactly the way you'd expect. A colonizer's catalogue, condescending, sneering, useful to power. The Irish, he assures his readers, are a barbarous people. And then, in the middle of all that, he stops. Because he has heard a story he cannot leave out. He tries to tell it coolly. He fails. It's a story about a monk in a mountain valley, 500 years dead, and a bird. A monk at prayer in Lent, Gerald writes, in a little hut so small that his hand, raised in prayer, went out through the window. And while his arm was stretched to heaven, a blackbird landed on his open palm, and nested there, and laid her eggs. And the monk, Gerald reports this in plain amazement, did not move. He kept his arm exactly where it was, in patience and gentleness, until the eggs hatched and the young were fully fledged and flew. Even the invasion's own propagandist went soft here. He adds that all over Ireland, this saint is painted with a blackbird in his outstretched hand. The conqueror's book, against its own grain, carried the gentlest story the island owned. Tonight, the man with the bird in his hand. Kevin of Glendalough. Welcome back to Sleepy Saints. 5 episodes now, and we have hardly stopped moving. Iona, the Skelligs, the open Atlantic, a slave ship and back. Tonight, at last, nobody goes anywhere. Because you'll remember from our first evening together that the old Irish homily counted 3 martyrdoms, and we've dwelt long on the white one, the leaving. Tonight belongs to the green, the ones who stayed, who fought the whole battle standing still, in fasting and vigil and patience, without ever losing sight of home. 1 valley, 2 lakes, 1 man. Settle in. Stillness is the whole story tonight. An hour south of Dublin, the Wicklow Mountains fold around a long glacial valley. 2 dark lakes lie in the bottom of it, one above the other, with a river threading them together. Oak and holly on the slopes, mist that comes down like a lid, and everywhere the sound of water. The Irish named it exactly what it is, Glendalough, the valley of the 2 lakes. Kevin came here sometime in the late 500s. The lives written about him centuries later give him the usual saint's furniture, noble Leinster blood, a monastic education, a name, Cumgan, that means fair begotten, the gentle one. What matters is the choice, and here you'll feel how different this episode is. Columba's calling pointed across the sea, Brendan's pointed past the horizon. Kevin walked 30 miles from where he was raised, and stopped. His desert was practically visible from home. That, we'll find, made it harder, not easier. He went up the valley, past the lower lake, to where the cliffs come down to the upper one. And there he made his hermitage, and you can still see it. On the south cliff, 30 feet above the dark water, There is a ledge with a shallow man-made cave behind it, reachable only by boat and a scramble. They call it St. Kevin's Bed. It is about the size of the space under a kitchen table. There, tradition says, he lived 7 years, skins for clothing, nettles and sorrel for food, the lake below, the sky above, and nothing else he owned in the world. Now, what did he actually do up there? Our first episode gave the answer in a single old word, glas martyr, the green martyrdom. And Kevin is its portrait because the practices the old penitential books prescribe, the ones that sounded almost unbelievable when I listed them 5 episodes ago, are exactly what his lives describe. The cross vigil, praying with arms held straight out in the shape of the crucifixion until the shoulders shook, and the water vigil, wading out into the lake in the black of night, standing chest deep in mountain water cold enough to bruise, and reciting the psalms there, steam rising off his shoulders until dawn. Why? Not hatred of the body, the homily was clear about that, and so were the monks. It was the same logic as Skellig's cliffs turned inward. Strip away comfort until nothing stands between you and God. The white martyr crosses the sea to lose everything. The green martyr stands still and lets everything fall away from him where he stands. And then, and this is the part nobody expects, the wilderness noticed him. The stories that gathered around Kevin are almost all animal stories, and they all have the same shape. Stillness answered by trust. An otter, the lives say, brought him a salmon from the lake, regularly, the way a neighbor brings eggs. When he dropped his psalter in the water, a scribe's worst nightmare. Remember what a book cost. The same otter dove, and surfaced and returned it unharmed, not a line blurred. And one small story with a thorn in it, which I love because it refuses to be sentimental. A monk of his community, the lives admit, looked at that helpful otter one day and idly thought what a fine pair of gloves its pelt would make. The otter never came again. The wild things trusted the valley exactly as far as the valley deserved. Which brings us back to the bird. It was Lent, the season of the long stillness, and Kevin was at prayer in his narrow cell, arm outstretched through the window, palm open to the sky. The usual vigil, the usual ache. And a blackbird came down out of the oaks and looked at that steady, open hand and made the most extraordinary judgment any creature makes in this entire series. She decided it was a branch. Straw by straw, moss by moss, she built her nest in the palm of a living man and laid her eggs. Put yourself for a moment inside that decision, his, not hers. The moment he felt the first twig laid across his fingers, he understood the terms. A nest takes weeks. Eggs take weeks more. The fledging, weeks again. His arm was already tired. And he held still. Day upon day, through the rains of an Irish spring, feeding himself, the lives say, with the one free hand, sleeping if he slept, without moving the other, an old man holding up a small brown family like a lamp, until the eggs cracked and the nestlings grew loud and one morning the last of them stood on his fingers and flew. A modern poet, Seamus Heaney, wrote that by the end, Kevin and the ache in his arm had prayed their way past reward entirely. The hand had simply become part of the tree of the world. 14 centuries of Irish people have kept this story warm, and I think they've always known exactly what it is. It is the green martyrdom, painted small enough to hold. The whole discipline, the vigils, the fasting, the cold lake, was only ever this: making of yourself a place where something fragile could safely land. Here is the oldest joke in monastic history: flee the world well enough, and the world will pack its bags and follow you. It happened to Anthony in Egypt. It happened to Kevin in Wicklow. Disciples found the hermit of the upper lake, then disciples' disciples. He came down in time to the broader ground where the two rivers meet below the lower lake, and there a monastery took root, then a school, then workshops, a mill, guest houses, boundary walls, until the valley of his silence hummed with one of the great monastic settlements of Ireland. A city in everything but name, grown around a man who had come here to be alone. And understand what a place like that was, in a Europe going dark. A boy could walk into that valley with nothing and be taught to read. A sick traveller could be nursed. A stranger fed without questions, because the rule counted every guest as Christ. In the scriptorium, year on year, quills whispered across vellum. The same patient copying we've watched all series, light multiplying by candlelight, and around it all the hours turned. The bell in the dark, the psalms before dawn, the daily unspectacular faithfulness of hundreds of ordinary men and women keeping the green martyrdom in its plainest form. Not the lake at midnight, just the next small obedience. 10,000 mornings in a row. Kevin, the lives say, watched his solitude become a city, and made his peace with it, mostly. He kept one foot in the wilderness all his life, retreating up valley to the old ledge when the bells became too many. The medieval life keeps a story about this, and whether or not it happened, it is perfectly true. An angel, it says, came to Kevin with an offer of the kind developers still make. Let us level these mountains, smooth the valley into rich open land, and your monastery will grow into a city for thousands, and your name will be great. And Kevin said no. And the reason the life gives him deserves to be quoted forever. All the wild creatures of these mountains are my housemates, gentle and familiar with me. And they would be sad. The mountains stayed. The monastery grew anyway, just smaller, and in the mountains' keeping. He governed it into deep old age. The annals set his death on the 3rd of June, 618, and the lives, never bashful, give him 120 years. Smile at the number, keep the point. He was a long time faithful. In one place. And the place outlived him magnificently. For 6 centuries, Glendalough taught and copied and prayed. Pilgrims wore paths over the passes to reach it. There's an old saying, repeated for generations, that 7 pilgrimages to Glendalough equaled 1 to Rome. And sometime in the years of the Viking dread, the monks raised over their city the building that still owns the valley, the round tower, 100 feet of dry-set stone, slim as a pencil, its conical cap aimed at heaven, bell tower, treasury, landmark and refuge, its one doorway set 12 feet up in the air, above the reach of the world. It has stood for 1,000 years. The door is still out of reach. Glendalough was not spared history. The annals count its burnings the way they count storms. Raiders from the sea, and honesty compels, Irish rivals too. The valley was rich, and rich places burn. It was rebuilt every time. What finally diminished it wasn't fire. In 1214, a generation after Gerald wrote down the Blackbird, the Conqueror's Church quietly folded the old diocese of Glendalough into Dublin. The Great Valley became a backwater. In 1398, an English force burned it once more, and this time the rebuilding was small. The city of Kevin subsided gently back into what Kevin had wanted all along. A quiet valley with prayers in it. Go there now, thousands do, and you walk through the ruins under the same oaks, the roofless cathedral, the little stone church they call Kevin's Kitchen, the gateway arch worn smooth, the tower. Hikers and pilgrims share the paths, the lakes are the colour they always were. And in the spring, in the woods by the upper lake, you will hear, of course you will, blackbirds, singing in the descendants of Kevin's oaks, entirely unaware of being famous. Let me set the two martyrdoms side by side one last time, because the series turns here. Columba stood at the stern and watched Ireland sink under the horizon. Everything loved, given up at once, in one clean, terrible cut. Kevin stood in a cold lake in the dark, 30 miles from home, and gave up nothing once. He gave up small things, every day, 10,000 times, for 60 years. White martyrdom is a wound. Green martyrdom is a callous. And the old homily, you'll remember, honoured them alike, because both are only ways of carrying the same cross, the slow unclenching of the hand from everything it wants to hold. And the valley's answer to what that unclenching is for has been sitting in an open palm this whole episode. You empty the hand so that something can land in it. Next time, the stillness ends. We follow the fiercest walker in Irish history, a monk who left Bangor at 50 and crossed all of Europe on foot, scolding kings as he went, planting monasteries like milestones until he crossed the Alps and died in Italy. Columbanus, the longest road in our series. But for tonight, the valley. If sleep is near, let it come, and if it helps, borrow the bird's opinion of that steady hand. It holds. You can build there. Sleep well. God keep you, and may you wake in the place of your resurrection.